Today on Newsday.
Is there a better way to do this now? That includes, have I emotionally fallen in love with this decision that I made 3 years ago? Is that the reason I'm thinking about not changing? Because it makes me look bad?
My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week Health, where we are dedicated to transforming healthcare one connection at a time. Newsday discusses the breaking news in healthcare with industry experts. Now, let's jump right in. All right, it is Newsday, and it is once again my pleasure to introduce you this gentleman who needs no introduction. So I don't know why they say that. Needs no introduction. Okay, here's.
And then they introduce him. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I think I'm going to throw out the 6 health AI updates from the checkup meeting that Google did, which I think are pretty interesting. Do you have any stories specifically?
I think it's probably just an interesting, this whole thing that may or may not be happening at Oracle. I talked to a CISO yesterday, and there's a lot of stuff going on.
When there is not transparency, there's a lot of frustration, isn't there?
Man, I can tell you, I've talked to a few folks now who are very perturbed at the lack of transparency and the wordsmithing that is happening that sort of all creates opaqueness to this situation at Oracle. There's reports from several organizations now that apparently there was some kind of a breach of the login infrastructure of Oracle Cloud, and they have more than 6 million records across 140,000 customers, 140,000 tenants. Oracle denies everything. They say in very plain, very clear, specific language what has not happened, but what they haven't really explained to a lot of customers yet is, has something happened and what is it? And they've been very tight-lipped about that. So yeah, a lot of customers are spinning on that. It takes me back to the conversation about CrowdStrike last summer. And even though that wasn't a breach and it wasn't actually a nefarious attack, it had a very similar effect on healthcare because it took a lot of healthcare systems endpoints down. And the amount of painful transparency that happened as the result of that breach, all kind of in the construct of like, okay, we're probably going to get sued. Somebody's going to sue us about something, but let's help customers understand what's going on and help them get cleaned up and back on their feet. And then the transparency of kind of like the post-action report and everything that happened and all the stuff they're doing to make it not happen again. That still continues to me to be like the shining example, especially after last year and change and a lot of other things that were very opaque in the way that they talked about it. And now we have this Oracle thing, and I'm getting the same vibe of like, come on, just tell us what happened.
Change healthcare. People just threw up their hands. They're like, nothing I could do. I mean, same thing with the CrowdStrike thing. And now with the Oracle thing, it's like, what could I have done? And one of the things you could do is you could mitigate by having multiple systems. Well, you can't do that with the EHR, and you really couldn't do that with CrowdStrike. And you could do it with Change Healthcare. And we saw some health systems do that. They had planned for the disaster ahead of time so that they could fail over to and scale up other systems.
Right.
But in this case, there is no other thing. And it's not an outage per se, right? It's a breach. It's just a breach of.
Well, and I mean, to be clear, again, these aren't medical records that have been stolen, so far as we know. The reporting all points to, and the researchers who've looked into this, it all points to the identity stack. So like login information, that kind of stuff, which is still super valuable and gives you access to who knows what, depending on what identity information was allegedly stolen. So there's definitely the challenge there. I think you're right. From a SOAT perspective, what can you do? The only thing you can really do is be prepared to do all the things that you would be prepared to do anytime that you had a breach, which is, okay, let's rotate passwords, let's change certificates, let's do all the things we do to try to protect ourselves, even though we don't know exactly what happened.
When I walk away from those things, I think it is just the known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And so what do we know? And just work with the non-anecdotal data, work with the factual data. We don't know that they're breaking in, those kind of things, but we know they may have credentials. Therefore, we do the things that you just talked about, which is great.
Yeah. I guess the Boy Scout motto of always be prepared and always be super paranoid and suspicious about what's happening out there, so that when you think something might be happening, you can take some kind of a measure to put yourself in a better position.
Makes perfect sense. All right. So let's go to this Google story. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So they have a checkup event every year, and this is really about their health AI updates. They continue to tweak the search results and give more meaningful information. And one of the things they are doing now is they're connecting communities, right? So, hey, here's what some other people might be saying about staying healthy or about that illness or whatever. And so it actually gives you reference points to go out and find other sources of information. This isn't necessarily medical information. They did a huge amount of work around that a long time ago, where they cleaned up the medical information that you would get from a Google search. Now, what they're saying is, hey, we can help you find other sources of people who are talking about this, communities that talk about this, good information and that kind of stuff. That was the first one. The second one is the one I want to talk to you about, because medical records APIs in Health Connect. Okay, managing your health can be hard when information is spread across different apps. To help, we've launched our new medical records API globally in Health Connect. These APIs enable apps to read and write medical record information like allergies, medications, immunizations, and lab results in standard FHIR format. With these additions, Health Connect supports over 50 data types across activities, sleep, nutrition, vitals, and now medical records, making it easier to connect your everyday health data and the data from your doctor's office. On Health Connect, your data is stored locally on your device, and you're in full control of which apps have access to your data. All right, so this is the equivalent of Apple's Health. You have Health Connect on the Android side.
Hmm.
I'm wondering at what point in our life, hopefully in our life, that we are going to have our entire medical record sitting on our phone.
Yeah. We talked about this actually when we were at HIMSS together too. This idea of we went through a period of time, I don't know, sometime in the late 2000, early 2010 or something like that, where we had personal health records. Personal health records was like a big part of the conversation. Microsoft had a personal health record. Google had a personal health record, which ultimately failed and went defunct. And a lot of that was because it was hard to get the information in and out of these personal health records that somehow were going to be owned by you and stored by you and managed by you. And a lot of people, I mean, the technical capabilities that you would need to be able to do that for a lot of people was just kind of beyond them, especially at the time. And so they weren't able to pull it off. But I think there's still, I keep talking about personal health records, and they probably won't be called that at some point in the future. They'll be called something else. But that idea of being able to pull all your data from all of your healthcare organizations where you've received treatment or you've been an inpatient. And the reality is that information is only episodic care. It's not really, if you have a chronic disease and you go back to the doctor every week, that's a really good thing. You'll have a lot of information on yourself about that chronic disease. But there's so much more to what your health is really attributable to, including your neighborhood and wealth inequity and 100 other things. That kind of stuff being in a personal health record that you have access to and that you manage would be great. And then you can dole out that information to the doctor or the research institute or whatever it is that you need for that organization or that person to have access. Being able to handle that and manage it on your own would be really great for privacy, and might even allow some patients to monetize that data in a way that they don't have control of today.
I think this is one of the holy grails of medicine, is getting all the information into one place. And I don't think it's getting it all into one place like a Cosmos or something to that effect. I understand the use case for those, but I think there's value to me from an engagement standpoint. I will engage in my health more if I had a complete medical record that I could utilize. I will engage a community of, let's call them fiduciaries, for lack of a better term, people who are going to help me with my health.
People
Right. So,
like me who have my same disease. And then you think about agentic AI and the capabilities that are there for an
right.
agent to be looking over your shoulder.
I'm also thinking like companies who are going to pop up and say, hey, send us your medical record and we will review it for any anomalies. I know that when we started doing reads with AI, one of the use cases, which was always interesting, was to have AI go back and look at the reads and then say, oh, and by the way, your original assessment of the image was correct, except we also saw this. right?
Uh-huh.
And I wouldn't mind having a second set of eyes, even AI eyes on my medical record to say, here are some potential questions you can ask. Now, I know this is going to drive some clinicians crazy. I remember one of the doctors had something like, please don't bring your Google information into my office. Like he had a plaque made.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Something about their medical record. I remember seeing these from time to time as I would walk around hospitals.
I could see them rolling their eyes right now when I say, look, give me my medical record. Let me engage some people. And I realize that there's some risk associated with that. I might engage incorrectly, but that is a very real possibility for some that they will engage incorrectly. But I'm not sure that's a reason to not give the information and make the information available. So I would love it if within the next 10 years, I look at my phone, I could see every encounter I've ever had. That would be fantastic. Hey, I wanted to close with this. So I'm on part 4 of a 5-part series on the VMware price shock. And the first article was a VMware price shock, a wake up call for health IT. Then I did assessing your options, the new risk equation for healthcare virtualization. And in
Right.
that, we talk about this whole idea of vendor lock-in, but we also talk through the different options, right? We talk about OpenStack, we talk about Hyper-V, we talk about whatever. The next one is building a multi-vendor strategy without clinical disruption. How do you migrate such a thing? And then the one I did this morning was the economics of escape, building your VMware exit business case. Really emphasizing this article this morning, the need to not be so hyper focused on the licensing cost. So people get fixated on licensing costs. Like, we got to get rid of this licensing cost. Well, there's all sorts of costs, right? And there's going to be all sorts of costs in the transition as well. And so you really do have to build out a pretty comprehensive model to look at it and say, yeah, I know their price just went up 600%, but does that mean it's time to throw them to the curb? Or is there a broader evaluation to do here, a strategic lens to look at it, a clinical lens to look at it, an integration lens, automation lens? Maybe you've automated a ton of stuff over the years and now you're going to be throwing that out and have to rebuild it. You're going to have to retrain your staff. Anyways, I'm on part 4 of this series, and I don't know, I'll probably publish the last one next week sometime, since I published 2 this week. But in the final article, I'm going to look at the future of where I think healthcare infrastructure is going to go. And that's even beyond virtualization. So I'm curious. This is a fairly hot topic in the 229 project and in the city tour dinners. People were taken aback. There was the initial blow. Everybody was talking about it at all times. And then the normal thing happened, which is we re-signed, we paid because we were locked in. We signed a new 4-year or a 5-year or whatever year agreement, thinking, well, I'm not going to have this happen again. The next time this comes around,
I'll be prepared.
I'll be prepared. But what happens in healthcare is other priorities pop up. And we don't get around to cleaning this up until it's like 6 months before the contract is due. And we're sitting there going, oh, we can't do this in 6 months.
Yeah. The easiest thing is just to re-sign the deal again.
And so that's why I'm writing this article now, this series of articles now, is to say, look, today is the day you're doing the work. Like, if you just re-signed and you have 3 more years, you can actually do something about this. But 6 months out, that's dangerous.
I mean, I think it's one of those things that, just as a good steward of the funds that are provided by the organization, you really should be looking at all the contracts that are coming up when they expire. Start a year out, start 18 months out. I mean, I know it's easy for me to say this because I'm not in that seat right now. And I know there's 100 sharks that are snapping at you. But to get on top of this, you kind of have to have some reservation of time for you and your team to look at contracts that are coming up that are going to expire, to ask yourself those questions. Is there a better way to do this now? That includes have I emotionally fallen in love with this decision that I made 3 years ago? Is that the reason I'm thinking about not changing? Because it makes me look bad because I'm making a different decision than I did 3 years ago? And the other important part of this is, as you talk about, what's the transition cost? How much time and effort is that going to take? There's a lot of costs there. But the tail of whatever the new thing is that you're thinking about going to, don't just look at the implementation costs. Look at the long-term costs. What's it going to cost us every year for maintenance contracts and all of that? But also, as you alluded to, the people time, the re-automation time, all those things are not to be overlooked and should be in the business plan.
I'm a little harsher than you. If you can't keep in front of your contracts, get a different job. In all seriousness, I mean, it's like, I know you're busy. I know you have a lot of stuff going on, but budget is 25% of the job of a CIO. It's a quarter of the job of the CIO. If you can't get in front of the budget, if you can't get in front of these kinds of things. Now, the surprise, that's not on you. I mean, we didn't really anticipate that VMware was going to do what they did. If it happens to you 3 years from now and I'm the CEO, I'm looking at you going,
Why didn't we have a plan for this? Yeah.
and then when you say, oh, well, we're so busy, we're doing other stuff, I'm like, yeah, you've got to learn as a
Prioritize.
CIO, you are the king of prioritization. Like that's something you should be able to do in your sleep. I want to close with this, which is there's a lot of moving one seat to the left happening right now in healthcare.
Mhm.
You just shake your head. Yes. You know what phenomenon
I
I'm
know
talking
exactly what
about.
you're talking about. Yeah.
It's CIOs are all taking the chair to the left. So they're leaving this health system, going to the next one. Somebody else is going to this one. Somebody else is going to this one. There's a lot of movement. Is that indicative of the time and space we live in? Like the pandemic hit. Actually, I'm connecting it as I'm thinking about it because during the pandemic, a lot of CEOs put off retiring. There's a lot of CEO change. The number one driver of changing of the CIO is when the CEO changes, period. If we just mapped it out, I'm sure the corollary, it's not always the case, but in a lot of cases, the CEO wants to
I
bring
want
in.
my own person. I want my own team.
Yeah. And so if I had to really look at it and try to find why this is happening, that could be why it's happening. What do you say to a CIO who gets a new CEO?
I've actually made this change myself. When my CEO started talking about retiring, we had some really good conversations. I'd been at that organization for about 4.5 years, and I decided that it was probably a good time for me to make a move. And some of this is also, I've done this off of publicly traded boards too. New CEO comes in. I almost feel like in some ways, if you have a good succession plan, you know that there's a good interim that's going to be there. There is continuity on the board, whatever the case may be, that you're almost doing them a favor by giving them some breathing room to make their own decisions. So they're not stuck with some decision that somebody made in the past. And that would maybe a good thing to consider. But when you get a new CEO, I think you've got to get in there and have a good conversation and understand, are you on the same page? Are you headed in the same direction? Are you compatible? I mean, a big part of any job interview is like you're not just interviewing for the organization and to see if you're going to make more money and all that kind of stuff. A lot of the interview for the CIO going to a new organization is like looking at that team and saying, are these people I can work with? Are these people who are going to have my back? Can I trust them? Do they really want me to succeed? Are they going to do the hard things to help me succeed? If you're not feeling that, you probably shouldn't take that job as somebody who's made the mistake. I can tell you that is definitely a thing that you want to make sure that you're rock solid on. See, I think when you get a new CEO, that's definitely one of the things you want to do. Just make sure that you're comfortable with the situation. And if you're not, it's probably time to think about making the move.
I'll speak to my mistake. My mistake was staying too long. And it's a very common mistake. And people hold on for whatever reason. They have kids in college and they like the paycheck. They don't know what they're going to do next. They're not confident in their ability to get another job and that kind of stuff. So they stick around. In a lot of cases, if you've lost your passion for the job, if you've lost your alignment, as you were talking, your alignment with the vision of the leadership team and that kind of stuff, it really does behoove you to do a serious self-assessment and determine, is this the place for me? And then have enough confidence to say, look, I'm going to go do something else. The reality is you may not make as much money as you did at this job. And that's okay because a lot of CIO jobs get paid extremely well. I don't think people are going to take a massive step back, but they may take a step back to a smaller health system or whatever it happens to be. It's a tough job. It's got a lot of responsibility, but it's fairly well compensated based on things that we see out in the market and whatnot. So, yes, you might take a step back, but it's likely not the end of the world.
Let's talk about the passion for the job too, because I've gone through the process of getting to a particular point in a job where it's like, okay, like a lot of things are fixed. We're in a really good position. I've always been a turnaround guy. Start to throw a wild pitch here and there just to make things interesting. You lose
That's
passion for
it.
the
That's
job.
what happens right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And so you decide to leave and you go to another organization. Some of it is because you're looking to rekindle the fire of being a CIO. And you go to a new place and you have the terrible realization sort of 3 or 4 months in, like, oh my gosh, this is exactly the same place I left. There's just different people in the seats around the table. That's when you really got to think about
Yeah.
what are you doing next?
Oh, and so many people, I get those phone calls. I'm sure you do too, which is like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to the new role and I got a better title and stuff, but it's the same stuff, different organization. And I'm like, yeah, and you've only been there for a couple of weeks. Imagine when you really know what's going on, it may not even be same stuff. It might be worse.
Exactly. I have a friend of mine who says the grass may look greener on the other side, but the reality is, as a CIO, the grass is brown everywhere.
It's important to know who you are, know what your skills are, know what drives you, what your passion is. For me, it's creating and building. And creating and building also lends itself well to turnaround, right? So a turnaround, you are creating and building, you're rebuilding, if you will. For me, running and operating, if you put me in running and operating too long, I will start a fire just so I can put it out.
Yeah. It's having said all that, the right person in the right place with the right team around them can make a huge difference in a community or a region. And we see that with a lot of the folks that we know. It's not really a math problem. There's some magic to figuring out the right person in the right place, the right job, the right, all of that.
Yeah.
It really does create a great environment for the community.
It's interesting to me because people will throw longevity at me. Like, I've been successful because I've been here for 15 years or 18 years or something like that. I'm like, that is not the metric. That is not the metric of if you've been successful. No one fired me. It is not the metric for if you've been successful. If you've been successful has a whole bunch of metrics. Like, is your health system in a better place today from a cybersecurity standpoint? Are the operations being standardized? Are you doing more with less? Are you able to address burnout? Are your systems serving the clinicians? Just because you lasted 20 years and everyone hates the systems, you're like, what? How is that a success?
Yeah. We couldn't find anybody else to take the job, so you stayed here. There's a lot of great metrics that tell you whether or not you're doing a great job. And the bottom line ultimately is the place better off than how you found it? And how much better off is it than when you found it?
I will say that very few CIOs can do the creating, building, and the running and operating. The very few can bounce back and forth between the two. In fact, I know very few. I don't know any, to be honest with you. I mean, usually people are like creator, builder, or runner and operator. Now, you can hire people who can do some of those things, and that's great. But I would say that in the life of a health system, every 5 years, you need the other. Like, you need a creator builder for a couple of years, and then you put a run and operator in there. But if they run an operator for 5 or 6 years, you probably need somebody to come in there and disrupt it again, because you don't want to be running the same thing that you were running 6, 7, 8 years ago today. We'll close with this because I'm sure you and I love talking. I was talking to somebody about software yesterday and how much software is changing. And he was throwing out this vision of, you're going to buy software and it's going to do the personalization, customization, and optimization on its own. Like, you're going to install it, it's going to watch you, it's going to collect information on how you operate, what you're doing, and that kind of stuff. And it's going to continue to configure itself to better serve you all along the way. Well, that used to be the IT's job, right? We used to do optimization projects. We used to do customization, personalization. We used to do all those things. We'd be at the elbow helping a physician go, hey, did you know you could do templates? Well, now the software is going to be smart enough to go, oh, I'm going to give you a standard template. Oh, you seem to see a lot of these kinds of patients. I'm going to tweak this template. And it's just going to keep doing that for you. And I'm like, wow, that's
pretty awesome.
That's an interesting vision for what software is going to do. I don't know if that's 5 years away, but it's sooner than 10. I can tell you that.
I think it's a great aspiration for folks who are out there building software right now to try to put into their plans, because I think everybody would love that kind of approach.
Yep. Fantastic. Drex, always great to hang out with you and talk about the news.
Same here. Love it.
Thanks for listening to Newsday. There's a lot happening in our industry, and while Newsday covers interesting stuff, another way to stay informed is by subscribing to our daily insights email, which delivers expertly curated health IT news straight to your inbox. Sign up at thisweekhealth.com/news. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.